Alex Gameworks here at SGC 2015. Can you tell me your name and what we're standing in front of and tell us a little bit about it?
Awesome. I'm Tyler Tomaseski. I'm the creative director for Innerspace. It's a open world exploration flying game that takes place inside of this inverted planet, sort of like a fishbowl. It's like a inverted planet where where the soil and water would be. It's air instead, so everything's sort of inside out.
Are there going to be multiple levels, or is it just this one planet that you're exploring?
Yeah, we have 3 planets, which are all different terrains and biomes. Each actually have their own boss, so it's sort of got a Shadows of Colossus vibe. But no, yeah, so there's 3 planets in total, all of which have their own collectibles, bosses you can defeat, a lot of narrative and lore if you're interested in that kind of stuff to sort of find, explore, and sort of unveil about this world.
All right, and I was noticing the aesthetic. Especially you said it was in pre-alpha, so I'm really impressed with the way it just looks and the way it feels to play it. Is there any... I can't think of any, especially flying game that kind of controls like this. Do you have any specific inspiration for how it looks and how it controls? You just kind of worked through it? What was the development for that like?
Well, aesthetic-wise, we actually went to a lot of traditional art. So for a lot of the stylings of the game, we looked at a lot of impressionistic paintings. Actually, we do think the best way to make something unique is to actually look at mediums outside of games. So for the style, we actually don't have a lot of references for games. But when it comes to the actual controls of the game that I reference most is actually Crimson Skies, a game for the Xbox. It has really tight, nice, arcadey feeling flying controls, so we sort of modeled the responsiveness of the controls after that. But our big references that we normally throw out are Shadows of Colossus and then Crimson Skies. But other than that, stylistically, it's mostly sort of our own creation, or at least we like to think so.
So as far as, because you said there's going to be bosses, and so presumably maybe smaller enemies as well, what is the combat system like? Is it just kind of what you showed me where you're just kind of flying around, or will there be more of like a gun-centered thing, or how's the combat going to work in this game? Yeah,
so one thing we actually really wanted to subvert and get away from was to actually avoid the typical flying game dogfight. We really wanted to get away from flying in circles, shooting things, going back around, looping around, shooting again. We really wanted to avoid that and try something else out. So what we wound up doing actually is that there's no guns in the game, and the way you interact with these enemies is that you actually have to scrape against them using your wings to inflict physical damage by sort of ramming into them. So it's very physical, and it's, because one of my favorite things in flying games is actually sort of flying through tight spaces, sort of really narrow corridors and stuff like that, just for that close call kind of feel. So we sort of wanted to integrate that into what little fighting there is. But we definitely want an emphasis on exploration and not too much on fighting, although there is combat. We want you to sort of interact with each of these bosses in an interesting way. So it's not just you see the boss, health bar, go ram into it for 2 minutes till it's dead. It's sort of a question of how does this boss live? How can I inflict damage on it? Do I want to inflict damage on it? Sort of just because we show you a giant fish doesn't mean you need to go kill it. You can, but we want the players to sort of figure out how would you interact with it. One of the things we're actually working on, it's called a sunfish, and we actually have some of the art online. It's this giant fish with this bloated kind of almost sun centered into it. So it's actually swimming out in the world, and it's got this nice bright core to it. But if you find the fish and you decide to kill it, the world will go pitch black, and it actually sort of affects the environment. So although some of the bosses that if you do kill, it'll allow you to progress through the game, those aren't necessarily always good actions to take. So we want the players to sort of think critically about their actions and not just sort of mindlessly play through it.
So yeah, you referenced Shadow of the Colossus, and I kind of get the feel that it's a little bit going for the bosses are almost part of the landscape more than enemies in themselves. Is that kind of the feel?
Yeah, no, we actually, one of the bosses we're working on the mountain, it's this giant crab, and you're just as big as one of its little eyes. When it walks around, it actually lifts out of the water. And because when it's submerged, it weighs so much, the water level actually adjusts throughout the planet. So yeah, we actually want these bosses and these enemies to actually be very embedded to the ecosystem and actually have an effect on the environment and the way everything's playing out. So yeah, everything's very embedded in the world. And I think that's sort of the big thing, is because it is an exploration game, it's very much about the world and the location you're in, but we wanted the bosses to feel very embedded into that.
What platforms is it going to be for, and is there a specific schedule for when you're planning to release it, or are you just kind of going at this point?
We're aiming for Q1 or potentially early Q2 of next year. We're going to be releasing on Windows, Mac, and Linux day 1. But we're planning on trying to get on some of the consoles, but we're going to start developing that once we're out on PC, and we'll be worrying about that as we get to it. So, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So first off, I have to know about the title. Is there a specific inspiration, or did you just...
Importantly different. Take, for example, the scene with Nathan Prescott, the douchey rich kid character who almost kills someone
Pay attention, man.